control exactly what people think, and that is our job.
Yeah.
Remember, it's illegal to possess these stolen documents. It's different for the media.
I was wondering who did that. Thanks.
Ain't nothing to it. A baby could do it.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
We make this judgment affirmatively. It will be an entire nation.
In other words, simply stated, we're living in an era of two kinds of revolution, one violent and the other nonviolent. Well, in order to relate this general concept of two kinds of revolution to the specific application here in the United States, it'll be necessary for us to examine rather closely the communist position on what they describe as the Negro question. Now, basically summarized, the communist position on the Negro question is as follows. As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. They said in no unmistakable terms that the Negro people, because of their secondary social status and their predominant working class composition, offered greater revolutionary possibilities than any other cross-section of the population. To develop these possibilities, the communists proclaimed that the American Negro constituted a separate nation within a nation, a colony within the continental borders of the United States. The people of this nation were said to be oppressed and exploited by colonialist, imperialist, racist America. Consequently, the Communist Party called for their liberation, their right to self-determination, to break away from the United States and to set up their own nation within our borders. Now, to bring this about, of course, force and violence must be used. A war of national liberation must be fought. I'm Ed Griffin. I'm a writer. I write controversial works. I think they're very important works. I deal with such topics as banking history, health issues, the United Nations, U.S. foreign policy, kind of topics where people get all heated up because they have strong opinions. But I consider myself to be a researcher, and I try to be a historian as best I can. So I deal with facts mostly, not in opinions. I've been doing this most of my adult life. I started becoming interested in issues of this nature in 1959. And by 1960, I was really revved up to it. I left my employment with a large insurance company and went in full-time in doing writing and speaking on these topics.
Hello. You know, I'm gonna, nice to meet you. Finally, we were having some like Zoom drama.
Zoom drama, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. But I'm so honored to meet you. I just want to let you know, my best friend and I started this podcast like maybe 10 years ago when we would talk about all this stuff. And we've been watching your work for years. She sends her regards because she would definitely like to be here, but she can't. She's a homeschooling mom and she has 3 kids, and that just takes up a lot of her time. So she doesn't really do interviews with me anymore. But I'm very happy to have you.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes. And I just want to start by asking, how did you know the world was not, what was the thing that happened in your life that made you realize the world isn't as what you were told it was?
I wish I could say there was a thing, but it's not a thing. It was many, many little things. And it all started back when I was working in the corporate world. And I was, climbing the corporate ladder and all that sort of thing. And I had no idea that the world was any different from what I really had expected it to be. But I had a client, excuse me, I got to take my earphone off a little bit because I'm hearing myself in a little delay, and it's like I'm interrupting myself.
Oh yeah, as long as you can hear me.
Yeah, I can. What I'm going to do is just reach over here and turn the volume down just a bit.
Yeah, no worries.
I don't hear myself quite. Okay, I think that's going to be better. So anyway, yeah, back to the thing. I was in the corporate world, as I said, and I was all wrapped up in myself and my family and climbing the ladder of success, trying to make some money, trying to figure out how to enjoy life and look good and all the things that young people do.
What?
Well,
I can't imagine that for you.
What? Yeah. Well, at least that's one of the things that I did. And, but then I had a client in Los Angeles, and I was waiting in the waiting room to speak with the president of this company. And he had some little magazines out there called The Free Man. And I didn't know what that was. I was looking for something more interesting, but he very wisely had nothing more interesting out there except this Free Man magazine. So it was The Free Man or nothing. So I started to read The Free Man. It turned out to have been a wonderful publication that I would never have discovered any other way. It was published by the Foundation for Freedom Education. And anyway, so I started to read it, and it was the first time I had ever been exposed to what you might call a libertarian point of view, or the ideas of individualism, a free enterprise, laissez-faire. All of those things were totally foreign to me because I came through the university system at Michigan. And Lord, there'd be no chance of any of that being taught there, I can assure you. But I didn't know that. So here was my first exposure to some new and interesting and challenging concepts. So I really wanted to finish reading that little magazine. And I thought, gee, I can't just take this thing. And then I noticed there was a whole stack of them there.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I get it. They really want me to take it. So I put it in my briefcase and got home that night, and I just devoured the thing. It was like a drowning man coming up for the first time, getting a breath of real fresh air. It was invigorating to get these ideas into my head. So I subscribed to it, and I read every issue of it. And then I really got carried away, and I decided if all of these current issues are interesting, I really need to get all the back issues. So I looked up, well, they were for sale. I got whole volumes full of them, and I read them all and studied them. And so the first thing you know, I discovered a part of me that I didn't know existed. And that is what I laughingly called, or jokingly called at least, my crusader gene. I didn't know I had one. It started to vibrate. And I became very crusader oriented. I wanted everybody to learn about these truths of human nature and economics that I had been denied access to in my younger days. So I became a crusader, and a new experience for me. And that grew and grew as I realized that so many things in the world were in violation of reality. I mean, I believed one thing, and then I discovered, well, it's just the other way around. And the reason is because people who were doing very well, profiting from this deception, were pretty much in control of the information channels. I thought, that's ridiculous. Who would have ever suspected that? You know, this is today.
That's your 20-year-old self.
Yeah.
Speaking, right?
How could that be? I mean, this is a free country, isn't it? And all of these things. So to answer your question, it started off with reading an article in a little magazine, and then it just grew step by step. And finally, I found myself reading books and then going to seminars. And I went back to the library. I thought I would never go to the library again. When I came out of school, I thought, well, I'm through with that.
There was no internet.
Yeah, right. There was no internet, but at least I didn't have to go waste my life in the library. Well, I found myself going back to the library and enjoying it and finding things that I never knew existed. So just one step at a time. It was no one big red pill. It was a bunch of little ones. And that process, by the way, is still going on today. There isn't a day goes by but what I don't see something as, oh my gosh, what a blow that is. That destroys all my cherished belief system on yet another avenue that's important to my life.
Yeah, and what you brought up is very important because you need to, or not you, but people in general, you still have to kind of remain open. I play with myself sometimes and try and put myself on the other side of things and try and see, like, am I overreacting, or what would I do, or what is, so I'm just fascinated by the fact that you were willing to have your mind open because you were interested in a pamphlet. And a lot of people that I know, including myself, they've had experiences that made them wake up, so to speak, or red pill them.
Yeah, there are experiences like that. And but in my case, I have to say there was nothing really big at one time. The biggest step probably was my first step. And that was that I came across another pamphlet written by an unknown, little-known college professor from some little Midwestern college. I still have the pamphlet somewhere in my files. I mean to look it up.
What year was this? Like in
that was about 1960.
60, okay.
That's, prehistory. We were reading clay tablets in those days.
Yeah, no.
But anyway, and this professor had written a pamphlet on how the United Nations was not what we were being told, that it was really a nefarious organization. And although it talked a lot about brotherhood and unity and peace, it actually was dominated by all the world's tin-horn dictators and some of the world's largest dictators who had dominated this political instrument because they wanted to get the whole world into the web of control. And I thought, what? That's not what I learned at the university. That can't be true. And
so, why did you dismiss this information? Because it sounds, like it sounds zany, right? Like if somebody, why? What do you think?
I don't know why. That's a good question. Why didn't I just walk away from it? I was tempted to. I thought there's nothing to this. These are wackos, whatever they got, probably an axe to grind. But fortunately I didn't. I thought, well, this is going to be fun. I'm going to check some of this out. I'll find out where these guys are wrong. I'm going to prove that they're wrong, that the United Nations really is interested in peace and brotherhood and mankind and tranquility. And I couldn't do it. I went to the library and I read everything I could find, mostly written by pro-UN people, but I recognized that it was very biased, that there were always two sides to an issue, and all I was getting was the one side. So that made me curious. And so I'm sorry to disappoint you. There was no big thing that...
No, I'm not disappointed. It's usually, I think you're rare. I think like you maybe another person that I've interviewed, maybe it's been really rare that somebody was able to change someone's mind because they had a pamphlet or something. And I think that's inspiring because what you're doing what Mark's doing with Wake the Hell Up and what other people are doing, what I'm doing, it actually trying to wake people up or give them information and give them another side to the story. It's very inspiring that, you can reach people, I guess, that way too.
Well, thank you for that. But please be aware that I wasn't convinced from the very beginning that this pamphlet was worth anything. I didn't automatically just say, oh, there, I just read it into the pamphlet. It must be true. I was convinced it wasn't true. But my curiosity got to me. And the biggest, I think the best way to compare that is to a really big topic that I got into. By the way, my first book was about the United Nations, because that little curiosity led me to about 3 or 4 years of pretty solid research on the origins of the UN, who was involved, what they said in their private papers, and what happened in Katanga when the first UN so-called peacekeeping operation over there in Katanga, where they completely destroyed a free system in the name of peace, and they brought war in the name of peace, and they destroyed freedom and liberty and installed basically communism in the Katanga. And I thought, wow. And this I was convinced because I got to original documents, including documents from the UN people themselves who boasted about what they were doing. They weren't even, when they talk to each other, they say, yeah, we got that one done, didn't we? Ha, ha, ha. People believed us. Things like that. I thought, wow, when you get to original documents, you've got to sit up and take notice. But the next big thing, and perhaps the book that most people have read of mine, is the one on the Federal Reserve System. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island, a second look at the Federal Reserve. And of course, it's about our banking system, our monetary system. It's a huge topic. I was totally unprepared to tackle something like that. I mean, here I am going to university, I'm having fun. I'm not there for an education. I'm there to have fun and meet the girls. Meet the girls, go to the parties. Yeah. But and
I know you did, but I'm just like, I just think it's very refined and cultured, and I'm like,
no, that's just a facade. It's just a facade, my dear. Underneath, we all are human beings, and believe me, when you're a young man, it's education and wisdom is not really at the top of your list.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
So anyway. I certainly didn't get anything about the banking system. I'm at the university studying speech and communications. So when I got interested in inflation and I wanted to do a documentary on what is the cause of inflation, I really didn't know where that would take me. All I knew was that I was pretty sure that what they were telling me wasn't true. They were telling me that it was always the other guy that was responsible. Prices were going up for groceries because the farmers were making too much money. The farmer said, no, the prices are going up for groceries because the grocery store is making too much money. And then they said, but also the middleman that delivers the grocery, he's making too much money. And then they all say, well, it's because of the unions. They're making too much money. And they're all pointing the finger at each other. And I thought, something fishy about that. I wanted to find out who was responsible. And I found out it was called the Federal Reserve System because those are the guys that make the money. And I think any child can understand if you have a limited amount of money and you got to use that limited amount to buy all the goods and services in society, there'd be an equilibrium established of value between the two. But if you can make this print money like it's taking leaves off of a tree, all of a sudden the money supply will grow. Everybody will have so much money, but the goods and services didn't grow. So all of a sudden you got to pay more money for the same goods and services. That's inflation. Well, even I could understand that without a college diploma to prove that I'd been to school. So I started to research that, and boy, what I came into, I discovered that was one of the biggest scams of all history. It was bigger than what I just said. It's so big, and I wasn't prepared. So that isn't something you just say, well, I read a pamphlet on it, therefore it must be true. I spent 7 years of my life digging into that one and came out the other side with quite a different understanding of reality.
So did you, I'm kind of guessing too, because you said you were trying to climb the corporate ladder, that this must have really pulled at your heartstrings too, right? To like, because it was, did it like kind of like challenge your belief systems because you were because of the career path that you were taking too? Was it emotionally hard for you to take in a lot of this information?
Well, basically that's true, but at least for me, I can't speak for others, but I think it's true of most people who are on that corporate ladder or the squirrel wheel or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. What most people are trying to make it in the corporate world really don't have any beliefs. Their only principle is, how do I get to the top? How do I make all this money? How do I get the power? And how do I get the big car and have the travel and the airplane and the yacht and so forth? And how do I really look good? And so principles, the only principle involved there that I could see was, how do you succeed? And if that means lying or cheating or twisting the truth a little bit, destroying your competition unethically, oh, well, that's war, ethics don't really get too much time in the boardrooms of most corporations. So it wasn't until I was able to get out of that world where ideas really were more important than where you stand in status. Then I found myself more comfortable. Apparently that was where I was supposed to be. Although a lot of people feel uncomfortable over there. They would rather be on the corporate side where there are no such worries about ethics or what's right or wrong. If you get away with it, it's fine. So I'm not trying to put the finger of blame on anybody. I think most of us have different spark plugs in our engine. I don't know, different things drive different people. But many of us have this unhealthy habit of worrying about what's right and wrong. It gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah, I know, especially if you want to be famous or successful, right?
Yes.
So what else was I going to ask you? So when you start like coming into this information, how did your friends take it, and how were you? Did you try and tell your friends and then they reject you?
Boy,
How did
I
that go
ever.
down? Or like
Yeah, boy, did I ever. That was one of my first mistakes, and one of my first important lessons is that once you start taking the red pill, people who haven't yet taken the red pill are not really happy about you, because you're asking them to come out of their comfort zone. You're telling them indirectly that they're not that they're dumb, but that they haven't been informed, you know? And if you're not careful,
they take it as they're dumb.
they take it as though it's an insult, that you're stupid. Don't you know this?
Yeah.
So yeah, your friends, it's hard on your friends, and therefore it's hard on you. And I discovered that in the beginning, I was coming on way too strong. I was psychologically, I was grabbing everybody by the lapels and say, let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about that.
Yeah, you just want to tell me, yeah.
So I learned to calm down a little bit and talk more gently about things. And instead of saying, they're lying to you, I'll just say, well, you know, there might be some hidden agendas here you want to look at.
So did you have some friends that were receptive to that? Did you feel?
Well, in the beginning, I think I lost some of my friends. But looking back in perspective,
they weren't really.
They were my friends for different reasons, and
Yeah.
so I was moving on to a different plateau. I made many, many more friends, new friends, than those I lost.
Better friends.
Yeah.
No,
better friends.
I agree. Well, I was just curious too. That was kind of your journey. It seems like I try and tell people that too, because I'm starting to do call-in shows on my channel, and I know, like, I love talking to people, and you know, a lot of people are frustrated because I would say if I had to categorize this, I would say truth seekers. You know, people that question things. We're really spread out. You know. And I remember when my friend and I, we started the podcast so we can have somebody to talk to. And we thought we did. And we wanted to share this information because we were very naive, and we were just like, oh, people don't know this. Well, let me just post this on Facebook, and then they would know, you know, not knowing that I was going to lose everybody I went to college with. You know, it's funny now, but at the time it was really hurtful, and I was like, oh, I was totally exiled. But now I definitely, the people that I've met, the connections that I've made, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I don't want to take a blue pill for a steak. I'm happy with the red pills that I've taken. And like you said, it's an ongoing process. So, you know, I'm an artist, but I like to be intellectually stimulated. So I'm always reading, I'm always finding things, I'm always talking to people, I'm always watching things. It keeps me intellectually satisfied, you know?
Right. Well, I can see that you and I are cut from the same piece of wood. We've got to have that. It's like it's like air to breathe and water to drink. You can't go very long without access to those things. I see that beautiful piece of art behind you. Is that something you created?
No, it's just a tapestry I got online.
Oh, okay.
But I'm a musician. I said artist, but I'm a musician. I'm
a musician.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. But
right.
but I can't draw that well. I mean, I can draw a little bit, but yeah. Anyway, but yeah. I wanted to ask you, who are your mentors? Like, I think, you know, when I first saw you 10 years ago, I think it was like on the Alex Jones show, and then I saw the Yuri Bezmenov interview that I'll ask you about that in a minute. But I think, like, for a lot of people, maybe of my age, maybe a little younger, it's, you know, like James Corbett and Alex Jones, but for you, who was it for you? And other people I didn't mention, but who are your mentors? Who did you like and like follow?
Well, I was pretty critical, even though I had no reason to be. In the beginning, I didn't know beans about much, but I was still critical. I guess I thought, well, what I did know put me in the position of advantage, which probably does, because in today's world, if you read one book, you're an expert, you know, compared to the average. But that's far from really being an expert on a topic. So I'm thinking about that. The one name that pops up immediately is Dan Smoot.
Dan Smoot?
Dan Smoot. He's long gone.
S-M-O-O-T?
Yeah, he was a former FBI agent. Well, very interesting story. I won't go into it, but he started off as a young guy, as a stevedore, didn't have an education. He made his living by carrying big, heavy boxes, and he was as a small guy. And then at some point, he got off into journalism and writing, and he became an investigator. And he went for the FBI, and then he quit the FBI and decided the FBI wouldn't let him tell everything that he wanted to talk about. And he produced something called the Dan Smoot Report. And it was a report that came out, I'm trying to think, I think every week he produced a report. If you can imagine 8.5 sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper with 4 pieces of paper. In other words, 8 sides.
So
that
like
was
a
the Dan.
newsletter?
Yeah,
Okay.
a single fold, but there were actually 4 sheets and 8 surfaces. That was
Okay.
the Dan Smoot Report. And so I stumbled across that, and I loved his style of analysis. There was no monkey business, no flowery phrases, not too many adjectives. He just said, this is what I want to talk about. And then he would talk about it, and then he'd tell you what he said about it. And he always included references, documentation, where he got his facts at the bottom of the report, and you could look them up. Say, the most wild things he would tell you, you say, I don't believe that. Well, you look it up and you find, oh my gosh, it's right in the congressional record, or it's in the book that he said that this person said it. Go get the book written by the person. Sure enough, he said it on page 94, paragraph 3, line 1. And so I admired that. And I said, when I grow up, I want to be like Dan Smoot and just stick to the facts and just nail it so that there can be no argument, no discussion against it. So that was probably the first and the greatest influence on my style.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm taking notes as you're writing, so I can check this out. That's yeah. It seems like he just had this really no nonsense style. Well,
that's all thanks to Dan Smoot. It's all, let's cut to the chase, everybody.
Yeah, definitely, because we don't have time. We gotta get going. You know what I mean? So, have you seen movies like The Matrix and They Live? And if you have, what did you think of those movies when you saw them?
What was the name again?
I'm sorry, The Matrix and.
Oh, The Matrix.
Yeah.
Oh, the movie The Matrix.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yes. Well, that of course is the basis for our adopting the red pill as our meme for Red Pill University and our Red Pill Expos. Are you familiar with those?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, that's where it came from. It was the movie, The Matrix, yes. So I definitely am familiar with it. I've studied it. It's pretty simple, but if you give it some thought, you can see there are deeper layers. And if you do that too long, you come out the other side and you say, oh my gosh, it's not a sci-fi story at all. It's real.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was just asking you that because I think They Live came out in the 80s and then The Matrix came out in the 90s. So as somebody that's been studying this stuff as from like the 60s, for you to see movies like that, it probably struck you differently because I'm guessing because I didn't see those movies until like after, I saw those movies but after I had started looking into this stuff. Does that make sense?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you saw it, you definitely, because I think, when I saw movies like that, I'd just be like, oh, that's really inventive and creative idea. But I'm guessing you're watching a movie like that and you're like, this is real stuff. This is real life.
Actually,
I get what they're trying to say.
It's true because when those movies came out in the beginning, I didn't see them.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until quite a bit later, people were talking about the red pill and I wasn't much interested. Red pill, all that pop culture stuff. I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
But then when I did see it, I thought, oh, this is reality. That's great.
Yeah. It must have blown your mind. I'm guessing, how did you find out about Yuri Bezmenov? Is that his name? The Russian?
Yuri Bezmenov, yeah. The KGB defector. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How did I find out about him? Okay, yeah, I remember now. I read his testimony in one of the congressional reports. I think it was published by the House Committee on Un-American Activities, or it might have been the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee. Anyway, one of those two, where he told his story. So I thought, well, gee, I'd like to really meet this guy and get him in front of my cameras. And so I nosed around, and I found a telephone number for him, and I called him on the phone, told him who I was, and asked him if we could meet. And he was kind of cautious, of course, and he said, "Yeah, all right." So it was that simple. We just arranged it, and we did it.
Oh, wow. I mean, now it's like, oh, you just find their website, you email them, but you have to like kind of really do a lot of deep digging. I mean, I respect that, but even, you know, I used to be a teacher, and I would tell my kids about microfiche, and they would like laugh at me. I was like, y'all are lucky. Like, huh?
What they probably say, microfiche, is that little tiny fish of some kind?
Yeah. They're just like, what? I was like, yeah, I had to go to the library if I wanted to get an old issue or an article, and I had to put it on this machine and like look at it and make copies. And
I bet a lot of your viewers right now, many of them have no idea that microfiche is a roll of 35 millimeter film, and that take picture after picture of all the page of the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, everything was all put on film. And well, then microfiche was a sort of a big rectangular square, where the other was a roll version of film. But yeah, before the internet, we had to go to filmed records or actual physical copies sitting away somewhere to read everything from the past. It was quite a chore.
Yeah. I know. So, I mean, people like you that have been doing it for a long time, much respect to you, because you really had to put more work into. I mean,
well, it just slows you down. Today, what you can do on the internet in about 10 minutes, researching a topic, might take you a couple of weeks or a month at the library using the film.
Yeah. And then you gotta wait, like, oh, somebody check that book out. You gotta wait for it to come back, and you're just like, yeah. I remember those days. What are your thoughts on the internet? I mean, you kind of said a little bit already, but I mean, pros and cons of the internet.
Well, that's it exactly. The pros and the cons, and it's like so many things in life. They can be good for good or evil. A knife, a hammer, a saw, internet, a gun, all can be used for good or evil. Yeah. Money, especially money. Yeah. So it's not the thing itself, it's who's using it and what their motives are. So I love the internet because it makes research and access to information so much simpler, but I fear it mightily because I recognize that if it's totally in the hands of a tyrant, then you will be completely limited to the information that you're allowed to have. And if someone can control the information that you get, that means they control how you think, because your thoughts are based up on information and what you consider to be facts. And if the things you think are facts are really lies, then your conclusions will be based on lies. And you've had it.
Yeah. I mean, you said it really well. We talked a little bit on the phone and before this interview, and I was asking you the similarities between the polio era and what's going on with COVID today. Because I know you've done like research into the medical mafia, right? And you kind of that. Have you done a research on the polio era specifically? Maybe you can't answer that.
Well, nothing on polio specifically, but I'm familiar enough with the story. It fits the general pattern, which I always like to go from the general to the specific. To the specific, I should say. And the general theme is that in the last several decades, the medical profession has become dominated by an economic interest. No longer is it search for scientific truth. It's dominated by profit. And I think anybody would have to agree with that. Whether they think that's good or bad is another issue. If they think that how far it's gone, or whether it's necessary, all those things are secondary. The fact is that anybody can see that the pharmaceutical industry, which is one of the largest profit builders in the world, has used its money wisely in terms of wisely meaning in terms of the advantage of the corporations, to change the availability of medical treatment so that only those things that are produced by that industry are considered to be ethical. They call them the ethical drugs. And it's interesting how they put those two words together. In my view, there's most of those drugs are horribly unethical, but they call them the ethical drugs as opposed to the street drugs.
Yeah.
And in my view, there's very little difference. But anyway, that's another issue.
Yeah, that's another show. Yeah.
The only primary difference is that the ethical drugs cause much more harm and death than the street drugs. It's a controversial statement. I'd love to be invited to prove that because that'd be easy to do.
I know that it's medical is the third leading cause of death, you know.
Yeah.
And I watched the Gary Knoll documentary on that, and now means like John Hopkins and the British Medical Journal and the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine have all said that.
Yeah.
And I would say it's probably even higher than that. It's probably one or two, because there's some things that they are still leaving out, you know.
You're
but
right. So anyway, with the general picture in place, that's what we're dealing with as far as the profession is concerned. Now we take a look at specific examples like COVID-19 or the polio vaccine or any of them. And if you really can dismiss all your preconceived ideas that come from your childhood, you know, like when I was a kid, I was really convinced that there was something underneath the bed at night. You could tell me there wasn't, but I knew there was. See, if you get to a point where you can pull that out of your brain. Well, no, okay, there was nothing under the bed or in the closet. And then you open your mind to the fact that maybe some of the adults used that scare tactic against you to make you good. You better do what you're told or the thing will come out of the closet and you'll be sorry. Now, things like that. I'm just making it up, but you get the idea. Sometimes adults use the boogeyman as a means of scaring the children into being good. And they say, well, it's okay because look, the end justifies the means. And so I think when you take that as an example, when you get to the field of the bigger life around us, there are a lot of people that use a boogeyman to scare people. Now, it's just a boogeyman. It doesn't really exist, but people believe it exists. And that's all you need is if they believe it exists, because what your goal is to change their actions. And the belief system, of course, comes first. Then that affects their actions because you want to do it supposedly for their own good.
Yeah.
That's how they explain it. So a lie is justified if it's for a good reason. And this is what this idea has permeated the medical profession. So at one level, you can say, well, okay, they're lying like hell to us, but it's for our own good. So they're good people after all. So that's one level of understanding. That's usually you go through the first door and that's what you find in that room. There's a door at the back of the room. Open up that door and the next room has a little different story. And that is that, no, it's not even good for you in the first place. It's really bad for you, but nobody wants to face that. So that's my view on the COVID-19 theater, I like to call it, is they tell us it's for our own good because we're all worried about the virus, the COVID, wear the mask. Oh my God, protect people, don't spread the virus and so forth. Nobody's dying, but it's coming. It's a boogeyman. It's a boogeyman. Don't worry, it's really real. You can't see it any place. You can't prove it, but we got to test for it. Nobody's dying, but we got to test. Oh, they're dying from something. All this stuff goes on.
Yeah, I know.
And so it's a boogeyman. But we're supposed to be content because it's for our own good or for the good of somebody else. Now we open up the second door and we find out that is not true at all. It's actually bad for us and bad for everyone. That's a hard door to penetrate because once you get to that point, now if you have this crusader gene like you and I do, it starts to vibrate and we think, we've got to do something about this. Yeah. We've got to awaken people to it. We're being taken to the cleaners. People are dying needlessly. We have to do something about it. And now the battle is on.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember we were talking too, you were saying something, because I was saying, you know, I'm in Texas and Austin because of the situation. It's been really hard for me. And, you know, there are a lot of people that are buying into it and it's very, it's not really allowing people to be themselves. And you were saying it reminded you that you were somewhere like a military was taking over. I forgot what you're saying. You said the vibe that's going on right now. It was familiar to you because I think it was like you were saying that you were somewhere and the military took over. It was like a military town, and because the military was there, people felt like they couldn't be themselves.
Oh yes, I remember. I don't remember the town, but it was some sleepy little town in the South. And I was there years ago. I was invited in to give a speech at the local, I don't know, I think it was the American Legion Hall or something like that. Small group, maybe 50, 60, 70 people. And the guy that invited me said, well, I'm sorry for the small group tonight. He said, there are a lot of people that really said they wanted to come, but they decided they better not. And I said, well, why not? He said, well, you know, this is a military town. And they knew that if they'd be seen at a meeting like this, where a speaker like you was presenting questionable things that are not so complimentary to some of the policies, the politicians, that could cost them their job. I said, what? There was a little red pill for me to take. This was in some sleepy little town in southern states of America. And people were afraid to even present themselves at a meeting to listen to somebody speak because they were afraid of the retribution.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I remember that very well. And of course, since that time, I've seen it over and over. You go to a big town like San Diego, which is all military, you know, dominant thing. You get pretty much the same thing.
Well, yeah, it's sad. It's sad that, you know, it's so funny when I was going through high school and you're worried about what other people think about you. And then you graduate, you're like, wait, high school never ends. There's still adults that are very, they're very much like that. But I guess in that sense, their jobs were being hung, in front of them. So if you have a family, maybe it's a little harder to like be rebellious or something, I would guess.
Well, yeah, there's always another line an inch away, and you never know where you draw the hard line. There's always a good reason to go along with tyranny, and each step of the way you can justify. But when you've taken 100 steps and you look back, you've gone all the way, and you would never have taken 100 steps for any of those reasons. But one at a time, you rationalize them,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to one of my friends and her son. She knows that the mass thing is bogus, and so so do I. And we talk about a lot, as well as other friends and I that have the same conclusion. But she was like, she has a daughter, and her son was like, oh, you should just. Her older son was like, you should just make her wear it to get used to it. And she's like, no. And she goes, oh, it's not a big deal. She's like, well, when is it going to be a big deal? Is it going to be a big deal when they come and contact trace you, when they test you, when they start temperature checking you everywhere? Like when, she's like, you're going to need to decide when it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Because, people need to decide that, because things are ramping up very fast. What do you think? Do you ever research any of the Bilderberg stuff?
I'm fairly familiar with the Bilderberg story. Mm-hmm.
I remember when I checked into them one time, with the Agenda 21 and New World Order agenda, they said that they were like 12 years behind from their meeting or something. And I was wondering, just through your research, do you think that they're trying to ramp stuff up right now because they're behind, or do you think that they're on time with their plan?
Well, that's a hard one to answer because I don't really have the inside track to any of that. What they consider to be the schedule, I just don't know. But I do know this, that they're very pragmatic people, and they never make a plan, but what they have sort of a backup plan or a way. There's always a knob or a switch or a slider where they can accelerate it or slow it down or turn it in a different direction to take advantage of unexpected circumstances. So I don't think they really have a hard timetable. I think at their various times in their development, they have imagined ahead. I think if we went back to say the 1980s or something like that, they probably thought they would have this all locked up by now. I'm just
Yeah.
guessing. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
But there have been movements coming along, like ours, for example, have slowed them down. And so that's okay. That's right. They just back off and let it sort of ripple out and let these people have a good time. And then they'll pretend to retreat, sort of, oh, we won. And they go back to their games again. And then 5 years later, they're back to the place they were before and they move forward. The old communist strategy of one step backwards and 2 steps forward. And 1 step backward, let everybody relax, and then 2 steps forward. And it's
is that the Fabian? Is that the Fabian way?
Well, I'm not a Fabians taught that. The Fabians taught primarily the value of delaying the final confrontation. They preferred gradual decay and collapse and fatigue on the part of opposition. They wanted their opposition just to give up because it goes on too long. And, in fact, Fabian himself, the general after whom that was named, that was his military strategy when he was up against a superior foe. He would always retreat and then come up from another side. He was always in the battle, but he always never engaged in full battle until finally the troops got tired of it and they went home. And then he was left with the winning of the field.
That's interesting because I get some people and they're like, it's too late, our country's gone, we might as well give up. And I'm just like, but that's part of their agenda too, to make you feel hopeless. To make you feel, not that I'm all Pollyanna all the time. I have my days where I get frustrated and I'm hopeless and whatever, but at the same time I'm like, well, it's not over until it's over. And if they make us think that we've lost in here, then we've definitely lost. So
that's it.
You got to keep going until you can't go anymore.
Yeah, well, that takes me back to Sun Tzu, one of his, the Chinese warrior and philosopher, The Art of War. One of his famous lines is the supreme excellence in warfare is to defeat your enemy without having to engage him in battle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true.
Convince him he can't win and he won't fight, so you win.
Yeah, I've been looking at this whole situation with the epidemic as it's like a psyop. It's also really being stressful on families, on friendships, on society. It's turning us against each other. Not only it's the racial thing going on, but it's the mass now against the unmasked. It's the people who believe the mainstream media and the people that don't. Really, the whole political divide that's going on right now. That's how I choose to divide it. People that believe the mainstream media and people that don't. Really, right? Even though they put the people that don't believe they lump us in as Trump supporters, and it's not necessarily the case. But they put but it seems like a lot of people that believe the mainstream media are the ones that are falling for the tactics and the lies and.
Well, yeah, because that's the channel of transmission. So that's where they get it. And and if they believe that's authentic and it's not tainted, it's hard.
They would never lie to us. What would they have to gain, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Let me count the ways.
Yeah, I know, right? We know. Why did I read it on your Red Pill University website that Vimeo removed some of your videos regarding the COVID. What did they say and what videos did you have that made them remove them?
Well, I had a whole bunch of them, and most of them are back up, by the way, now at Red Pill University. But I had a whole bunch of them. Anything that came along good that I thought people needed to consider, I put in the Red Pill University video archives. And some of them were quite just very scientifically oriented. Others were a little more controversial because they challenged the existing medical establishment. So it covered, the wide range of things, and they all came down. In fact, my whole account, they just closed my whole account down. I mean, if I had put up old Popeye cartoons, those would have gone down too.
That's racist. He beats women, whatever,
whatever
they find, right?
And their reason for doing so was that it violated their policy. Well, their policy was that anything that contradicted the official position of the CDC or the World Health Organization was by definition false. Therefore, they won't tolerate false information. So that's the new,
This is so 1984.
it is totally 1984.
Yeah, I'm like, is this for real? I just, and the doctors, did you hear about the doctors that got banned, the frontline doctors that was circulating?
Who?
Did you hear about that? The frontline doctors that.
Oh, yes. We have the frontline doctors up there, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they were, but I like what, they're just focused on a couple people that were very like kind of bombastic, but there was some other good doctors in the crowd. And there was this one guy that I like, or a couple of doctors actually were just talking about, we need to have different debates. It's such a big topic and we're only allowing one narrative to get through. Why are they censoring? Why can't we have other points of view so we can come to a better conclusion? And that's how, there are people that are like, that have that belief like, oh, good, well, it's good that they got shut down because they're spreading misinformation. But it's also like, well, who's to say what misinformation is? Why don't they want you to hear the other side? Why can't we have a conversation where you can have that official narrative and these people talk too, and let the public decide, let people decide for themselves. But the fact that they're telling you what to think and what to decide for yourself is the thing that creeps me out. And I'm always wary when somebody tells me I shouldn't look at something, or they censor it. That should be a huge red flag for people,
Yeah, that's a dead giveaway right there. When somebody says you should not be allowed to read this or hear this, you better think, maybe I really need to.
It's also insulting. It's also insulting because it's like they're telling you the capacity of intelligence that they think that you have, and what you can and can't. Like they're just saying, oh, that they think that you're not smart enough, or you can't entertain two different ideas in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I always go, I'm just the type of person that somebody tells me no, I'm going to do the opposite, So.
Yeah, I could see some theoretical basis for that argument if you're dealing with children whose mental capacities haven't developed yet to be discerning, to tell the difference between truth and untruth.
That's true, but
even that is kind of dangerous because you're assuming that children don't have any intelligence. So where do you draw? At what age? You're into a slippery slope even there. But certainly when you're dealing with adults.
Differently.
There's no.
Well, the thing is too, parents should, not let the internet babysit their kids. Like they should watch what their kid watches. Mm-hmm. And then when they get old enough, they'll make their own decisions and stuff. But they're also, I know a lot of parents that make that argument. They also just, they don't watch what their child watches. They just let the internet babysit them, and that's terrible, especially with all the subliminal messages they're putting in video games and, I mean, and TV shows for kids, with sexual tones and violent tones. And, it's horrific. I think I'd be one of those crazy parents. I wouldn't let my kids watch TV at all, ever. They'd hate me. They think I'm crazy.
I know.
Now that I know,
you'd be doing them a big favor.
Yeah. Now that I know, I don't know. Have you seen that movie Out of Shadows? It was on YouTube, and it basically it was about the stuntman that worked in Hollywood.
Oh yes, Out of Shadows. In fact, we have that on our university site too.
Yeah.
We got them all. You see.
Yeah. So I remember I was in the comment section, and this one guy was like, his comment said, "Man, I used to think that my parents were crazy for monitoring the things that I watched. And now that I realize that they did me a huge favor. Thank you. I love you, Mom and Dad." And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. My parents were the same way. Like I couldn't watch The Simpsons. Okay. I couldn't watch at first, like they really monitored like everything that I watched.
Yeah.
And I just thought they were crazy and wanted to destroy my life, because that's what you think when you're a kid.
Of course.
Right. But now I get it. And I think my dad was a film major, and I think he knew a lot about subliminal messaging and stuff like that. So I think that could have been part of it, I mean, because literally me, and all my other friends would make fun of me because my parents are so strict. And
well, it sounds like you had some great parents.
Yeah, I do. I want to ask you maybe one more and I know we got to get going really fast. I can talk to you for 10 hours though. I swear. Do you know anything about Gassar Nasara?
Well, actually, I do, yes.
Oh, yes. Would you please do tell?
All right. I'll start by saying this. Before the day is over, in fact, it might have already been done because I've been working on it. I will restore an article I wrote on that topic about 15, 20 years ago. This is not new. And it sounds like it's new, but it's not.
Yeah.
Nasara first made its appearance quite a while ago. And the idea for your listeners who are not familiar what that is, I forgot the acronym, but it's the name of a piece of legislation that's supposed to produce banking reform. And it was written by some engineer, actually, who took an interest in financial matters and did his homework pretty well, because he and I got into a debate on the internet over the merits and the demerits of his proposal. There were some great ideas. And of course, his overall mission was to recapture control of the monetary system away from the banking cartel. And so we were on the same page in terms of the goal and the necessity of doing that. But my complaint was that the proposals he was making would not accomplish that. It would appear to be doing that, but it would merely shift the power to create money out of nothing from one group to another. It would shift it from the bankers, big bad bankers, to those nice, honest, trustworthy politicians.
Great.
Big deal. It would turn out the same way. As long as you give a group of people, I don't care who they are, the power to create money out of nothing and determine its value and how much of it there is, that power will corrupt them. Yeah. And it'll not turn out for your benefit or mine. So that was our point of disagreement, basically. And that my argument was that his idea, turning it over to the people, unquote, sounds good, but it always winds up in the control of a few people, 1, 2, or 3 people. And you get right back to where you always were in the beginning. So I didn't think I had a solution. Well, that was part of it. Now, the real interesting part is that the way people heard about Nasara was because of a figure on the internet identifying itself as the White Dove. Nobody knew who the White Dove was. Kind of like today's QAnon. It's a mysterious thing. It was a mystery. The White Dove was sending these messages out. Don't worry, folks. There's a group of people inside, deep in the government, who are working day and night to save us. And they're on the verge of arresting all these bad people and recapturing all the stolen money from the people. All the gold that's hidden in the Philippines is going to be restored to the treasury. The national debt's going to be paid off. The evil people are going to go to prison, and it's going to happen any day now, any day now, any day now. In other words, the message was, don't worry about it. Don't do anything. Just relax. It's all taken care of. And meanwhile, they threw this Nasara thing in to sort of make it seem like it had some depth to it. And this went on for month after month after month after month. The day of salvation was always just tomorrow. Well, the plan was to do it today, but there was something happened, something wasn't in place, and so now they're getting ready to reschedule it. It went on and on and on and on. And I recognized it right away as a PSYOP operation, or what I thought was a PSYOP, just to keep people from doing anything to bring about real change, because it was all taken care of, right? Then at the end of that saga, it turns out that the White Dove was kind of a lower middle class lady living in a trailer somewhere in the Midwest, and this was all a fiction of her mind. There was no inner group inside she hooked up with a guy with a real estate fraud. They had criminal actions against them. They were broke. Or now she was either acting alone or she was being subsidized by some alphabet agency group to keep this thing going. And it was a total dud, or worse, because it prevented people from taking action. So I wrote about all this 20, 30 years ago and published it. Now here the whole thing comes up today. Now we've got Nasara and we've got QAnon and we've got, don't worry, folks, it's all taken care of.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump is working with the deep state, and there are people, they're going to arrest Hillary any day. And, you know, I've seen it all before. Do I need to say more? I'm going to publish this whole thing, if I haven't already, tonight. And you can see that nothing, absolutely nothing has changed.
Wow. Wow. That's mind blowing. And I know that there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be mad that you said that.
I know it. I'm mad that I have to say it. I wish it were true. But you see, that's the point. People want it to be true. They want QAnon to be true. So they hang on to that. And if you challenge it, oh my gosh, it's like you've committed some kind of a crime against them because you're destroying their hope. I understand that.
Yeah.
I get it.
Do you think that there is some kind of war, though, going on within the light and dark fractions of the government? Because it does seem like there's some kind of push and pull. In my lifetime, I've never seen a political campaign and the stuff that's going on. Maybe you've experienced it, but I have never seen anything this grandiose. I've never seen the media and so many people go at celebrities, Hollywood's academia, go after presidents so much. What are your thoughts on that then?
Well, you talk about saying things that'll get people mad at you. I'm about to really step into that now. Before I answer that, I've got to just say that if there's one thing I have learned over the years of observing this war going on, is that the controlled opposition, if you understand what that means, where the other side puts forth a false leader or false group or false movement of some kind, is this our enemies, has always been our enemy's strongest single weapon. Time and time again, we have found social leaders, political leaders, academic leaders who have stepped forward and have said and done all of the right things. And we thought, there's our man at last, there's our man. And as the time plays out, they're not. They always give in at the last minute. It's always a last minute cave in. People who are going to vote for this piece of legislation, we got the votes, but it comes for the vote. Oh, well, Joe so-and-so changed his vote at the last minute, and now we lost. But he tried. He tried. He was up against tough opposition, you understand. It's always an excuse. I've seen that over and over again. I saw it in the development of the Federal Reserve System, where the banks themselves created the Federal Reserve. And then one of the many things they did to sell it is to convince the people that the banks were against it. Some of the bankers went on the road and they wrote essays, gave speeches about the dangers of the Federal Reserve System, which was their creation. And the average reader of the newspaper would say, oh, listen to this, Maud. And look, the Federal Reserve, the bankers don't like it. I guess it must be pretty good. We've seen political campaigns won over and over and over again, not on the strength of the values and the admiration that's due to the candidate, but on the strength of how horrible the people are that are against the candidate.
Yeah.
People don't vote for candidates, they vote against candidates. This is the greatest reality of modern politics. If we understand that, then we realize that if you're running this master plan, you've got to control both sides of the conflict. Yeah. You've got to have controlled opposition, and you better make it look good. And the best way to make your man look good is to have the other side foaming and frothing at the mouth over this guy, because even though you don't like this guy very much, you look at his enemies and say, gee, he must be pretty good. Now that is my answer to your question. I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying if the American people don't consider this as a possibility and look very carefully and don't be just sitting there so naive to accept everything that's presented to them, they possibly could be setting themselves up for a condition where the team, the movement that they trust so much, will be the team that at the last minute will declare martial law and turn the nation over to martial law. It'll never go away. But because he did it or they did it, the people that they loved and trusted, well, it must be okay because he is our man. And when Mr. Trump met with Mr. Oh my gosh, Rockefeller's man, oh gosh, the name just popped right out of my head. He's the German speaks with a deep voice, you know. Kissinger, Henry Kissinger.
Oh, Kissinger.
When
Okay.
Mr. Trump met with Mr. Kissinger early in the presidential campaign, met with him for a whole day, nobody said what they talked about. I thought to myself, why would Trump and Kissinger meet during the presidential campaign? And then I remembered Mr. Trump himself told us, he said, you should vote for me because I'm a deal maker. I make deals. I know how to work with everybody and anybody. I make things happen. And he told us that he had no principles. I'm a deal maker. I'll make it happen. But then maybe, I said, I don't know, maybe he was there to make a deal. What would the deal be? It could be this. It could be like the White Knight. It could be the QAnon thing. Trust this person or this group, because look how hateful the other people are that don't like him. He must be good. Let's support him because we hate the other people. We must not close our minds to that possibility. Now, I want to make this very clear. I'm not saying that I know that this is what's going on. But if we close our minds to that possibility, we're stupid, because we know that is the strongest tactic of our enemy for decades after decades. That's the way they have always succeeded. We have no reason to think that they stopped using that tactic today. So let's wake up and consider it and not just jump because somebody's blowing the whistle and we're trained to jump when the whistle blows.
Awesome, awesome, awesome answer. Just one more question and we're done. What, do you have hope, or are you positive about the amount of people that are waking up, so to speak? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I guess that would be my last question.
Good question. And that's a question I've been asked ever since day one in this struggle back in 1960. The only difference is that there are more people asking it now, because back in 1960s and 70s, most people didn't even know we were at war. Primary reason we were losing it because we weren't fighting it. The other side was, but we weren't. My answer has always been the same, and it is yes. I see a constantly increasing crescendo of awareness and awakening. And I also see an increasing crescendo of power and control on the other side. Both sides are building, like it's a steep wall now. So I know that time is running out. We're coming to the decision point very soon. Don't ask me how soon. I don't know.
I know. I can feel it though. I
feel it. Yeah.
I can feel it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm an old duffer, and I'm convinced it's going to be in my life.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I can say. I just.
Yeah. No. I mean, yeah. A lot of this.
The question is the awakening going to happen quickly enough to develop enough force to overcome the existing force that is in the controlling side of this thing? The ones people are trying to lock it up, and those who are trying to figure out how to unlock it. Right now, it's still pretty much in the hands of the controllers, because we can see that all of these governors and mayors and police chiefs who are cooperating with allowing the riots to continue because they want a situation where somebody can declare martial law. They want to create things so frightful that people will beg for martial law and be grateful to their president or whoever it is that calls for martial law. So that's running out of that time. We see that power system is in place. We have to overcome that. So we don't have a lot of time. So I'm encouraged. But the thing that scares me the most is that people still may not understand the true nature of the opposition.
Yeah.
They will turn to false leaders instead of real leaders.
Yeah.
That scares the heck out of me.
Dude, is there anything else you want to say? Would you please promote your wonderful Red
Yes, I am going to say, please do not take my remarks as being pessimistic. To me, there are three positions. You're either pessimistic, you're optimistic, or you're realistic. And to me, the most pessimistic position you could hold is to be in the realistic camp. Because if we're realists, we know that hope is not lost. Things have been done in the past where things have been much more hopeless than it seems to us. You take the American Revolution, for example. I mean, that war was lost. Those George Washington and his ragtag army were through. But George Washington went to his men on Christmas Eve, and he said, men, I know that your enlistments are up in the morning. You can go back to your families. It's end of the year, but I want you to follow me one more time. We're going to do a surprise attack on the enemy. And they grumbled and they mumbled. They were cold, they were frozen, they were hungry. A lot of them were out of ammunition. They said, yes, Commander, we'll do it. And they crossed the Delaware in the middle of the night. And then when they got there, the Hessians and the British were all in their bunks, sleeping off all the wine and whiskey they had drunk in celebration for the victory. And boom went the cannon, and the men went, and the enemy went running into the woods, and Trenton was taken by the revolutionary forces, and that was the turning point of the whole war. It was a miracle. Not really a miracle. It was a miracle in the sense that it would never, impossible to happen, but it was realistic because Washington figured they weren't expecting this. Let's take advantage of that and take the initiative and not be cowards and don't give up. Let's fight. That's not a miracle. That's just human nature if you've got what it takes here, you know. So I look at the situation we're in kind of like that. Yeah, we can say, oh, it's all over. Oh, we say, then it is over. But it's never over till it's over. You said that a moment ago.
Yeah.
And we have to internalize that message. It's never open. Never open, never over until we quit. And I'm not quitting, and I can see you're not either.
Yeah. Not today. Anyway, please promote your university and anything else.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me, because that, frankly, the university, Red Pill University, is the path to victory. If there is one at all, in my view, that's the path. That's the staging area where we pull together people of wide divergence, opinions and interests, lifestyles, cultures, religions, races, nationalities, I mean, different economic status. We all have this one concept, and that is we want to be free people, want to be free. And that's all we ask. And we ask them to come under this big, broad tent and leave our differences behind us and focus only on overcoming the opposition from this concentration of tyranny that's being forced upon us in many different ways. And it's working. The entry level for that is the Red Pill University. Mm-hmm. And from there, we can build a coalition. We're planning to put campuses in every community in the country and around the world, for that matter.
We got to get some good translators.
Translators, yeah. We've got them. People are willing to translate.
That's awesome.
We're building the first campuses right now. Our plan, well, I won't tell you too much about it, but it's going to involve a car caravan and a cruise and people with honking for liberty and so forth, and dump the masks and things like a caravan. We'll have motorcycles in there. We'll have automobiles. Motorcycle clubs are saying, yeah, we'll participate in that. Can you imagine the impact of 100 cars, 500 cars, 1,000 cars driving through a city or driving on the freeway, you know, with their flags waving and their messages written on their windows in soap, you know? Yeah. Take the red pill. Just a show of solidarity. People think they're alone. They don't realize that we are in the majority. Once they see that we have the majority, now we have the morale to build a true movement. It's not over. That's what I'm saying. It's not over. And anybody wants to see the beginning of this process, the doorway to that is redpilluniversity.org.
Okay, cool. I'm going to do a lower third for you too when I introduce you, but I'll also put it in the link. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's where I'll see you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, my dear.
Yes.
I hope I haven't scared anybody away, but you asked me my opinion, and I have a bad habit.
Yeah, no,
of
it's
expressing
okay.
it.
It's great. It's great. So no, I get some diverse opinions, but I will talk to you later. All right, guys. Peace.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.